By the end of this century, entire coastlines we know could vanish beneath the waves. As rising seas claim more land year by year, historic cities and entire communities are slipping toward a future where they may only exist in memory and photographs. Here are 10 places we could lose to rising sea levels. Honolulu faces an existential threat unlike many coastal cities, with both visible beach erosion and invisible groundwater hazards converging to create a perfect storm of climate vulnerability. The Hawaiian capital's unique geology and island setting magnify the dangers of rising seas. The paradise beaches that define Oahu are disappearing at an alarming rate. Notably, the island has already lost more than 5 miles or 8 kilometers of beaches to coastal erosion, fronting seawalls and other shoreline armoring. Across Hawaii, 70% of beaches are currently threatened, with 13 miles or 21 kilometers already gone due to shoreline hardening structures. Research from the University of Hawaii paints an even bleaker picture. 81% of Oahu's coastline could experience erosion by 2100. with 40% of this loss happening by 2030. For popular tourist destinations, the timeline is even shorter. Hanauma Bay, one of Hawaii's most visited beaches, could lose 88% of its sandy area by 2030 during high tide periods. By 2050, sea level around Hawaii is projected to rise between 0.7 and 1.5 feet or 22 to 46 centimeters. However, the long-term outlook is far more concerning. By 2100, sea levels in Honolulu are projected to rise between 4 and 8 feet or 122 to 243 centimeters compared to 2000 levels. These projections are especially troubling as Hawaii will experience sea level rise 16 to 20% higher than the global average. Under intermediate scenarios, Hawaii can expect 150 high tide flood days per location per year by 2050. Without dramatic intervention, some areas of Honolulu are expected to flood nearly every day by mid-century, fundamentally altering the landscape of this island paradise. Among the world's nations threatened by rising seas, the Maldives stands as perhaps the most vulnerable. This island nation faces complete submersion within this century, representing the most extreme case of climate-driven national extinction on the planet. The Maldives holds the distinction of being the lowest-lying country globally, with an average ground-level elevation of merely 5 feet or 1.5 meters above sea level. The highest natural point reaches only 8 feet or 2.4 meters, essentially making the entire nation extremely vulnerable to even minimal sea level increases. Geographically, this archipelago consists of approximately 1,190 coral islands grouped in a double chain of 26 atolls. Currently, almost 80% of the Maldives sits less than 3 feet or 1 meter above sea level, with islands typically averaging only 1 to 2 square kilometers in area. This combination of minimal elevation and scattered geography creates unparalleled vulnerability. Scientific projections paint a grim future for the Maldives. By 2050, approximately 80% of the country could become uninhabitable. Looking towards century's end, projections suggest approximately 77% of the nation's land area will be underwater by 2100. Signs of danger already appear throughout the archipelago. Presently, 90% of islands experience severe erosion. 97% of the country no longer has fresh groundwater, and more than 50% of the national budget goes toward climate adaptation efforts. The Netherlands has earned worldwide recognition for its extraordinary relationship with water, with Amsterdam exemplifying human adaptation to living below sea level. Throughout centuries, the Dutch have transformed what would be uninhabitable wetlands into a thriving metropolis through engineering innovation. Amsterdam lies approximately 6.6 feet or 2 meters below sea level, making it one of the world's most famous examples of land reclamation. Many of Amsterdam's buildings rest on 49 to 65 feet or 15 to 20-meter long wooden poles that extend through mud to a sandy layer about 36 feet or 11 meters deep. The central station alone stands on approximately 9,000 wooden poles. This unique foundation system allows the city to exist despite its challenging geography. Amsterdam relies on an extensive network of dikes, dams and sluices to prevent flooding. Furthermore, the city maintains its iconic canal system that serves both as drainage channels and helps manage water levels. According to climate models, sea levels could rise about 1.6 feet or half a meter by 2100 in a low emissions scenario, or up to 6 feet or 2 meters in a higher emissions scenario. Beyond this century, projections become more extreme, potentially 16 feet or 5 meters by 2150. These rising waters threaten to overwhelm current protections. Currently, the infrastructure might handle a 3 feet or 1 meter rise, yet estimates suggest 4 to 6 feet or 1.5 to 2 meters rise over the next 79 years. Subsequently, this would place approximately 700,000 people, 97% of Amsterdam's population, at risk of displacement by century's end. Manhattan's vulnerability to coastal flooding became painfully evident when Hurricane Sandy struck in 2012, unleashing an unprecedented storm surge that reshaped understanding of New York City's climate risks. Hurricane Sandy claimed 43 lives in New York City, mostly from drowning in areas where waters rose rapidly. Lower Manhattan plunged into darkness as floodwaters rushed through streets, knocking out power to nearly 2 million people. Presently, sea level at the Battery in Lower Manhattan is projected to increase 14 to 19 inches, or 35 to 48 centimeters by the 2050, and 30 to 50 inches or 76 to 127 centimeters by 2100, compared to a 1995 to 2014 baseline. The severity depends on future warming and the possibility of rapid ice melt in Antarctica. Consequently, high tide flooding will increase dramatically. While New York City currently experiences approximately 10 high tide floods per year, as measured at the Battery, that number could rise to between 60 and 85 days by the 2040. By the 2050, the number of people living in the 1% annual chance floodplain could more than double. Without intervention by 2100, almost 50% of buildings in Lower Manhattan will be at risk from storm surge, and 20% of streets will face daily flooding. Thailand's capital faces a double threat, standing on sinking land yet surrounded by rising seas. With an average elevation of just 5 feet or 1.5 meters above sea level, Bangkok represents one of Asia's most endangered metropolitan areas in the climate crisis. Located on the low-lying Chao Phraya River Delta, Bangkok is currently sinking at an alarming rate of 1 inch or 2 centimeters every year. This subsidence compounds the threat from sea levels which are rising around 4 millimeters annually in the Chao Phraya River. Nearby waters are rising even faster, ½ inch or 1.2 centimeters per year, which experts project will erode approximately 1 mile or 1.3 kilometers of land annually. Originally built on swampland that was drained for agriculture and urban development, Bangkok sits atop a 49 feet or 15-meter thick layer of soft clay. Previously, excessive groundwater extraction caused subsidence rates as high as 120 millimeters yearly in 1981, though improved practices have reduced this somewhat. Despite these improvements, the weight of Bangkok's expanding infrastructure, including 700 buildings over 20 stories high, continues to push the city downward. The devastating floods of 2011 brought Bangkok's vulnerability into sharp focus when a fifth of the city was submerged. Throughout this disaster, hundreds of people lost their lives as waters flooded the capital. Bangkok could be completely submerged by 2100, potentially displacing 14 million residents. More immediate projections suggest 1/3 of the Thai capital might be underwater by 2050, displacing approximately 11 million people. London's relationship with rising tides dates back centuries, with the iconic Thames Barrier standing as a testament to the city's long battle against flooding. The barrier spans 1,700 feet or 520 metres across the River Thames near Woolwich, and features 10 steel gates that can be raised during storm surges. When elevated, these main gates stand as high as a 5-storey building, with each weighing 3,300 tonnes. Originally, engineers expected the barrier to close only 2-3 times annually. Yet operational reality has proven different. Closures occurred just 4 times in the 1980s, but jumped to 75 times in the 2000s. The Environment Agency's own guidance states the barrier should not exceed 50 closures yearly to prevent failure. Currently, about half the closures address fluvial flooding rather than tidal surges, creating additional wear on the system. Without changes to operation protocols, the barrier might reach the end of its functional life by 2030 to 2035. For London, sea level rise projections for 2100 range from 18 to 31 inches, or 0.45 to 0.78 metres, depending on emission scenarios. The Thames Estuary 2100 plan anticipates these risks, outlining adaptation through raising tidal defences upstream by 2050, 15 years earlier than originally planned. Alarmingly, 174 of 193 hospitals, 191 of 360 rail stations, and 547 of 587 utility installations across London sit in medium or high flood risk areas. Dubai's ambitious coastal engineering projects represent a stark contrast to other threatened cities. With its artificial islands and luxury developments built directly above sea level. The United Arab Emirates coastal development began in the 1970s and has transformed the Persian Gulf shoreline through massive dredging operations to create iconic structures like Palm Jumeirah. Throughout Dubai, developers have prioritized oceanfront expansion with little consideration for rising seas. The creation of artificial islands involved sand dredged from the sea floor and protected by rock breakwaters. Yet these engineering marvels come at a cost. The Palm Island project has eroded the natural coastline, requiring 5.5 million cubic meters of quarried rock with an enormous carbon footprint. Beyond the famous palm-shaped islands, Dubai's coastline now features extensive luxury development, whereby 90% of infrastructure throughout UAE coastal zones is built within several meters of sea level. Oftentimes, Dubai's structures lack long-term stability. Most buildings stand on sand with shifting foundations, exemplified by the Dubai Eye, the world's tallest Ferris wheel, which required complete base reconstruction due to dangerous instability. As a consequence of climate change, sea levels in the Persian Gulf are projected to rise by up to 20 inches or 0.5 meters by 2050. Looking toward 2100, the outlook becomes dire. 6% of UAE coastline is predicted to submerge, with projections indicating sea level rises between 16.5 to 38.5 inches or 42 to 98 centimeters. In extreme scenarios, waters could rise 29.5 feet or 9 meters by 2100, potentially making Dubai's elaborate infrastructure among the shortest lived in human history. With its low-lying geography and porous limestone foundation, Miami Beach stands at the front line of America's battle against rising seas. This popular tourist destination faces existential challenges that threaten its very existence before the century's end. By 2050, sea levels around Miami Beach are expected to rise between 10 to 17 inches or 25 to 43 centimeters higher than 2000 levels. Looking toward century's end, projections become increasingly alarming. By 2100, sea levels could rise up to 6 feet or 183 centimeters, potentially submerging vast portions of this coastal community. Although global averages indicate serious concerns, local factors magnify Miami Beach's vulnerability. Currently, the city experiences 12 inches or 30 centimeters of local sea level rise, 50% higher than the global average. Furthermore, tidal flooding has already increased dramatically, with the frequency of sunny day flooding up over 400% in Miami Beach since 2006. To combat these rising waters, Miami Beach has implemented extensive adaptation strategies. The city has installed over 30 pumps that force water out of flood-prone areas, with plans for 90 total. Additionally, officials have elevated roads, upgraded stormwater systems, and implemented higher seawalls. The city is developing a comprehensive sea level rise vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan that analyzes impacts from sea level rise, groundwater, and storm surge. This assessment enables authorities to evaluate flood risks and prioritize assets for adaptation through the year 2100. The floating city of Venice confronts a paradoxical fate, as the very waters that shaped its identity now threaten its existence. Both sinking into the mud below and facing rising seas above, Venice represents a critical warning for coastal heritage worldwide. Venice has dropped approximately 6 inches or 15 centimeters over the past century. Currently, the city continues sinking at roughly 2 millimeters annually, a process exacerbated by historical groundwater extraction that accelerated subsidence between 1950 to 1970, when Venice sank nearly 5 inches or 13 centimeters. Throughout this same period, sea levels around Venice have risen nearly a foot since 1900. Flooding frequency illustrates this growing crisis. Between 1900 to 1920, Venice experienced high tides exceeding 4 feet or 110 centimeters only 6 times. Yet in the past 2 decades alone, such tides occurred more than 150 times. November 2019 marked a catastrophic turning point when floodwaters reached 6 feet or 187 centimeters, submerging over 80% of the city and causing approximately €1 billion in damage. After decades of planning, corruption scandals and delays, the Meuse flood barrier system finally became operational in 2020. The system consists of 78 mobile gates installed at strategic locations that rise from the seabed when high tides threaten. Although designed to protect against tides up to 10 feet or 3 meters, Meuse faces significant challenges. Initially projected for activation just 5 times annually, the barriers were raised 49 times in their first 2 years. Given that sea levels might rise between 2 to 4 feet or 60 to 110 centimeters by 2100, experts fear Meuse could require near-constant activation, fundamentally altering the lagoon's ecosystem. Built below sea level between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain, New Orleans faces a precarious future, as its geography combines with climate change to create increasingly perilous conditions for residents. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 revealed New Orleans' extreme vulnerability, when 80% of the city flooded after multiple levee breaches in the federally built hurricane protection system. This catastrophic event claimed 1,392 lives and caused $125 billion in damages. Fundamentally, the disaster stemmed from engineering flaws in the flood protection infrastructure rather than the storm itself. Historically, the city has relied on levees, flood walls and pumps to keep water at bay. Yet these systems have repeatedly proven inadequate during extreme events. Much of New Orleans sits below sea level in a bowl-like structure, making it exceptionally vulnerable to flooding. Complicating matters, New Orleans experiences significant subsidence, sinking land, with some areas dropping at rates approaching 2 inches or 5 centimeters annually. Looking toward 2100, projections indicate sea levels around Louisiana could rise by 2 to 4 feet or 61 to 122 centimeters. Currently, the sea level around Louisiana is already 2 feet higher than in 1950, primarily because of sinking land. Remarkably, about 2/3 of relative sea level rise in coastal Louisiana stems from subsidence, with only 1/3 from global sea level rise.